Kia ora, welcome to Under the Checkered Flag, MotoGP edition. I'm your host Kate, and we're just going to jump right in. Welcome back! This week we are racing in Barcelona. I am so very excited. I did think Rins was going to be racing because home Grand Prix and all of that, but his injury is still just ruling him out of this round, which is a big shame. But overall, I'm just excited to have some racing. I've just been on holiday. I may or may not have planned my holiday around MotoGP because I am absolutely addicted to it. I can't help myself. It's just, the way it is. MotoGP is life. So this episode, I'm just going to recap the racing that occurred at the Red Bull Ring because I was on vacation on Monday, so I didn't release an episode. Then I'm just going to go over some silly season rumours, and then we're going to jump into the predictions for this week's race. It's all going to be very exciting and very, hopefully, flowy, but we'll soon find out. I do have a bit of a scratchy voice. The reason for that, I was sitting on a plane with strangers for hours. You're always going to get sick. It's just one of those things. So bear with me. But let's get on to the Red Bull Ring results. Oh my gosh. Moto3. I constantly and keep believing that this is without doubt my favourite form of racing, Moto3. I know it's dangerous and I know it's a little sketchy to watch, but what a finale. 0.005 of a second between Onchu and Holgado, and I have to say it was payback because Onchu took it. I'll show up some graphics on the screen showing how absolutely close it was, because my gosh, that was a finish and a half. The whole race was really fun to watch, but that ending was absolutely incredible. So we did have Onchu in P1, Holgado in P2, and Sasaki in P3. I think that it was just absolutely wonderful racing. If you want to watch one race this season, I would watch that one. The Red Bull Ring, Moto3, it was just absolutely incredible. It was so much fun. And I was actually on the plane watching this because my plane had Wi-Fi to get to LA, and then there's me sitting there and I'm just like doing some wild hand gestures and things because it was so absolutely crazy, and I'm surprised I didn't get kicked off the plane or taken into custody or anything, but alas, I digress. It was a wonderful race, highly recommend it, and absolutely incredible, possibly my favourite race of the year. Over in Moto2, we had, I suppose, a bit of a surprising winner. We had Vietti. Now, every now and then, he just seems to pop out some form and just absolutely perform an absolutely beautiful race. And that's what he did here. He beat Pedro Acosta by 1.435 seconds, which is pretty darn incredible. I thought Acosta would have this all wrapped up. I don't even think I put Vietti in any of my predictions because, yeah, when he does win races, he pops up out of nowhere, it seems, but a very good job for him. And in P3, showing that he's definitely getting back into the swing of things, was Ayagura. So, overall, another pretty good race. Unfortunately, that's, where the excitement for the Sunday races stopped. Because as we move on to MotoGP, we get the first inkling of, oh no, I hope that this isn't the way that MotoGP is going, because it was boring, dull. There were very, very, very few overtakes. I think someone said in the last 11 laps there were 13 overtakes, which is just absolutely... Sorry, my doggy, just making dog noises as he does. But yeah, there were only 13 overtakes in the last 11 laps, which is a bit of a snore fest. This isn't Formula 1, this is MotoGP. I want my overtakes. But alas, I digress again. We're going to move on to the sprint race results first, and we're going to hit some talking points from the sprint race, because as you all know, there were quite a few. So the sprint race. Well, where do you even begin? Now, admittedly, it's been quite a little bit of time since the incident at Turn 1 occurred, and at first I was in the same mindset as pretty much everyone else. I was convinced that Jorge Martin should have been black flagged, but the more I looked at the replays, the more the alternate angles and everything came out, I actually don't think he's as much to blame as everyone is trying to make us believe. So, yes, he was the initial instigator for the accident, which did ruin a lot of people's races. However, I actually think the penalty, the single long lap penalty, is sufficient for what was caused. I do think it took far too late to be implemented. However, I do also think that given the fact that the penalty was applied on the Sunday and Jorge Martin could still be in the championship fight, I think that giving him that penalty on that Sunday did much more damage to his championship chances. And so I actually do think it's kind of fair, that penalty. Also, a big factor in my decision making was the fact that it was at Turn 1. Turn 1, first lap, we're going to see so many of these, and especially I think in the sprints where there's such an instinct on the fact that you have to get in front immediately. We see it in the Sunday race. Overtaking is becoming harder and harder, just purely because of many different factors. I'm not even going to solely blame it on the aero, I'm not going to blame it on the tyre temperatures, I'm just going to blame it on a variety of factors. We are seeing that MotoGP is becoming harder to overtake, so therefore you basically got a drag race off that start and finish line. Ducati have made massive gains on KTM when they're getting off that start finish line, and I think it's absolutely incredible for them, but it also means that, I mean, we saw it here. So Aprilia, we saw Maverick Vinales do a Maverick Vinales start absolutely horrifically, and then because of that he found himself in the middle of the pack. Jorge Martin got a rocket ship start, much like the KTMs usually do, and boom, you've got contact. You're coming into the first corner, you've got 22 guys fighting for the same bit of asphalt, and they're not all going to get it. These guys, bless their souls, they're competitive. We all know that. That's why they're MotoGP riders. They're not there to ride around in circles, unless you're a Honda rider at the moment, but the rest of them, they're not there to just ride around in circles. They're there to win. They're there to score as high as they possibly can. So, coming into Turn 1, they know this is their best opportunity to make up some serious ground, especially if they've qualified badly like Jorge Martin did in this race. It's sort of a given that these sort of incidents are going to occur, and we're going to have to either change something about it, which I can't see how we could, unless we go very heavy on the penalties. But the fact is, these penalties are sort of in line with what the stewards actually said they were going to do. For the first infraction, and this is Jorge Martin's first big infraction this year, they're giving a long lap penalty. It's what they said they were going to do. And I'm the biggest critic of the stewards. I don't like what they do half of the time. I dislike the lack of transparency in everything they do. But to be fair, they've done exactly what they said they were going to do, and so I can't really fault them for that. At least not this time. The lack of consistency, the fact that Moto3 and Moto2 seem to have a completely different set of rules, that irritates me. But in this case, Jorge Martin getting a long lap penalty for this Turn 1 incident, I'm okay with it. So the MotoGP sprint race results were Pecco Bagnaia in P1, Brad Binder in P2, and Jorge Martin in P3. I know it seems harsh that we saw Jorge Martin stand on that podium on the Saturday, but as I said, the fact that it seemed to impact him more in the main Grand Prix race, which seems to be where the FIM and Dorna seem to shove everything still at that main Grand Prix race rather than the sprint races, it sort of balances out a little bit. I guess if we knew what their contracts were like in regards to the sprint races, which we still don't know because the sprint races sort of came out of the blue, it may be a different feeling, but I'm not overly upset that he got a medal, and yeah, still got his podium. Although, to be fair, I would have loved P4 Alex Marquez to get a podium, because I'm a big Alex Marquez fangirl. I think he's great fun. He just seems like an absolutely hilarious human being. Now, the Sunday race. Now, this was a bit of a snowfest, if I must admit. Probably quite a good thing, because I was still on that aeroplane, and I think I'd done enough damage by gesturing wildly in Moto3, so that having a bit of a snowfest of a MotoGP race calmed me down a bit, and then I actually got some sleep on the plane. So I'm not complaining too much about this one, actually. But anyway, I digress. I'm still in vacation brain mode. I apologise. In P1, we had Pecco Bagnaia, a wonderful weekend for what is more and more likely to be the 2023 MotoGP World Champion. In P2, we had Brad Binder, and in P3, we had Marco Bezzecchi. So, like I said, a really, really great race from Pecco Bagnaia. You know, I'm definitely getting some Jorge Lorenzo vibes from him, just by the way that once he gets in front, he's just smooth and runs away with it. Admittedly, I don't quite enjoy watching Pecco Bagnaia as much as I enjoyed watching Jorge Lorenzo when he was racing. I am a Jorge Lorenzo fan. I know that gets me a lot of hate, but I just think the way he raced was so smooth and so rhythmic. Whereas with Pecco Bagnaia, I do feel like he's been taught this, which is a really great thing, but I just don't see that sort of natural flowiness compared to Jorge Lorenzo, which I think is just a really interesting point to note, because it's really making me wonder if we are going to see another alien anytime soon. I'm hoping for Pedro Acosta to give us some alien vibes when he comes into MotoGP, but all we can do is wait. So, while we're on the topic of Pedro Acosta, let's touch on silly season a bit more. We got the news that Johann Zarco is going to LCR Honda to replace Alex Rins. Alex Rins is off to Yamaha, replacing Franco Morbidelli. So that leaves an open seat at Pramac Ducati. We do think there will also be another open seat at Gresini Ducati. At the moment, I believe these are the only two contentious seats. I personally think that Franco Morbidelli is going to go to Pramac. I think that Valentino Rossi is going to try and string some deal together with Pramac to say, hey guys, you guys can have Franco Morbidelli for a really cheap price, possibly even free, if we can have a 2024 Ducati for Marco Bezzecchi at VR46. That's just the way my brain went, so whether that's true or not, I don't know. But either way, I think either Marco Bezzecchi or Franco Morbidelli is going to be taking that Pramac seat. I think that the way Marco Bezzecchi is, and the way he fits in with that VR46 team, I think that he's going to stay at VR46. I think he's hoping to do an Enea Bastianini. I think that if he performs well for the rest of the year, and admittedly that performance is going to be harder to maintain now that 2023 Ducati of the factory boys is going to start to improve a lot quicker. I think that if he can, keep a steady performance for the second half of the year, and then when he jumps on that 2023 Ducati next year, if he puts on the performance that he did at the start of the season, I could easily see him battling for that factory Ducati ride and, sidestepping Pramac, which I think is probably one of the goals he'll do. And that does have the added benefit to VR46 of getting Franco Morbidelli straight up into Pramac. And so no matter which way this coin falls, whether Franco Morbidelli goes for free and the 2024 Ducati goes to VR46, or if Franco Morbidelli goes to Pramac and he's on the 2024 Ducati, VR46 is winning here. And I've got to give props to Valentino Rossi. That man is an absolute genius. Props, Ale. Good work. But that also leaves the Gresini seat. Now, I think this seat is going to go to Augusto Fernandez. Why? Because KTM met with Dorna again to try and get themselves 2 more bikes on the grid. I personally cannot understand why Dorna is saying no. I really think that they should be like, okay, 1 year contract, KTM and Red Bull have to fund it themselves, let's go with that. Then I think they should start looking ahead to 2027 when we're having that absolute rule change, possibly engine size changes. I think they should say 2027, okay, here are the rules for how many bikes can be on the grid. They need to make a stellar decision like that now, because there's only 3.5 years until we are in 2027. And that's the time that I think if we are going to get a new manufacturer, that's the time they're going to come in. I honestly think that everything between now and then is a write-off. Unless we get an Indian team, which is very, very possible. Now it does look more and more likely that Indian Grand Prix is happening. I think that, yeah, we need to be looking to 2027 to set grid sizes. We all want 4 bikes per manufacturer. We all want 24 bikes on the grid. But I think for now we should be getting that KTM team. Admittedly, I may be a bit biased because I'm a Pedro Acosta and Marc Marquez fangirl, and I would really, really like to see them at a team together. But alas, I don't think it's going to happen now, which I think is bullshit. Sorry, but that is just the way I'm thinking about it. Absolute bullshit. But alas, if they don't get those two, they've got 5 riders. They've got 5 riders on contracts, which means they've only got 4 bikes, 5 riders. The math doesn't add up. Someone is going to get burnt. And I do think that someone's going to be Augusto Fernandez. The guy has had an absolutely stellar rookie season. He's done so, so well. And I will be so gutted if this happens because I think he's performing really well on the KTM. I do think it would be absolutely hilarious, however, if Pedro Acosta does take a seat and then Augusto Fernandez works his way up through Ducati, and that's like thoughts KTM's chance of a world championship 1 year. I loves me some poetic justice. It would be amusing. But yes, I don't know how likely that is to happen, but I do think it is extremely, extremely likely that we are going to see Augusto Fernandez on that second Gresini Ducati seat alongside Alex Marquez. It's the only thing that I can see happening, especially now that both Tony Arbolino and Jake Dixon have signed contracts to stay in Moto2. You know, it's the only way it's going to go, in my brain anyway. Hopefully I'm wrong. Hopefully Dawn will turn around tomorrow and go, yes, have a third KTM team. Do it, please. It would be entertaining. The fans would love it. The sponsors would love it. TV would love it. In fact, this is a win-win-win situation. As long as Red Bull pay for it. Should just be done. While I'm on the topic of silly season, it sounds like Johann Zarco's contract. This is a rumour. I do not know if this is true. This is something I've heard through the grapevine. The rumour is that he signed a 2-year deal with Honda directly, not with LCR. And he's also signed a 1-year extension to that for racing for Honda in World Superbikes. Again, I don't know how absolutely true that is, but it is a very smart business move if it is true, because Johann Zarco isn't getting any younger. He needs to, put some money in the bank so that he can look after his family and everything like that for the rest of his lives. I make it sound like he's got multiple. Maybe he's a cat. Maybe that's why he always lands on his feet like he has with this deal. I don't know. But he's getting rumoured to be getting double what Ducati offered him financially. Ducati offered him a 1-year Ducati deal, possibly looking at him as a replacement for Bautista in Superbikes in 2025. But taking this Honda deal, getting that extra bank, getting a 2-year contract, possibly with a +1, a much, much smarter move for Zarco. I hope it works out well for him. I really, really hope that Honda have learnt from the absolute balls up they made with Alex Rins. In not listening to Alex Rins, they lost him. And that is going to be such a loss that hits Honda hard in the long run. I'm hoping that Zarco can come in and they listen to him, because we know they didn't listen to Rins. We know they didn't give Rins anything that he asked for, like, you know, the machinery, the calyx frame. That was an absolute fuck up on Honda's part. I think that, provided Honda have learnt from this, I think that Zarco can come in, provide some absolute stellar feedback. I'm sure he's picked up a huge wealth of knowledge while working for Ducati. He's not going to be picking up any insider secrets anymore, but maybe he's got one or two up his sleeve that he can pass on to Honda. I know that the riders don't know much, or they know different things about the bike than the engineers and things like that do, and I know that he won't be able to, you know, give Honda the smoking gun, so to speak. But I think there's serious potential in this Zarco and Honda pairing. Fingers crossed it works out. Excuse me. Fingers crossed it works out for all parties involved, because I want to see Honda battling at the front. I don't even care if Marquez is on the bike anymore. I just want to see Honda battling at the front as well. So, fingers crossed that it all works out. But now, on to my favourite part of the show, where I make predictions that turn out to be absolutely wrong, and then next week I'm going to pretend that I never made them at all, and we'll all act surprised. So, unlike possibly every other news outlet, I'm going to root for Aleix Espargaro this week. I really hope he performs very strongly here, and I really hope he gets a win. I'm sure we all know why, but alas, let's not skip ahead to MotoGP. Let's start with the Moto3 predictions. So, Moto3, the race. Admittedly, I'm really struggling with making these predictions so early, because fortunately today it's Tuesday. I'm going to be releasing this in a few hours, but normally I'm recording these on a Sunday, and I'm looking at the weather forecast and it's so far ahead that it's often changing. This week I've got a little bit more confidence in the weather forecast, and we are looking possibly at rain on the Sunday. So that sort of spices things up with the predictions a bit, because we've got some people who are stronger in the rain, some people who aren't. I'm going to gamble against the weather, because so far it has let me down every single time. So I'm going to assume a dry race. Maybe a little bit moist for MotoGP. Mainly so I can stick Ollie in there, because, you know, we've always got to stick Oliveira in there if there's some rain. I'm sure that Razlan just does a rain dance every time, you know, we're coming up to a Grand Prix weekend, just so he can get up there. But anyway, I digress again. I jumped ahead. Moto3, my predictions. P3, Jamie Massier. I think that's a reasonably good prediction. He was down, I think... Oh, this is going to test my memory. I think he was in P5 last year, but I'm not 100% sure. So don't quote me on that, but I think he's going to be P3 this year. So you can quote me on that, but only if I'm right. If I'm wrong, please just forget this ever happened. In P2, I think we're going to have Deniz Onju. After that absolutely banging performance last week, it sounds like, based from Speed Week, they've announced that he's going to be moving to Moto2 next year. So, whether that's true or not, check with Speed Week, check with your reliable sources. But if it is true, that confidence boost, plus the win from last week, I think he's going to be in solid P2. I don't think he's got the pace in certain parts of this track to win this week, which is why I'm giving the win to David Munoz. I think that he's going to take that top spot. So to recap, P3, Jamie Massier, P2, Deniz Onju, and P1, David Munoz. Over in Moto2, I think it's going to be a little bit more predictable. After his win last week, I think Vietti is going to be in P3. He performed really strongly at this track last year. I think that, plus that confidence boost, is at least going to get him on the podium this weekend. Only one way to find out. We'll just have to watch and wait. In P2, it's our champion of P2s. It's Aaron Canet. I think he's not going to break that winning curse this week. I'm hoping for it. I'm practically begging for it before the end of the year, because if it happens, I'm just going to take a day off work. I'm going to call my boss and be like, hey bro, Aaron Canet won. He's going to be like, who the fuck is Aaron Canet, Kate? And I'm like, he's in Moto2. And then my boss is going to be like, okay, I'm writing you up for this. But either way, I won't care because Aaron Canetta's won and it will be glorious, and I'm looking very, very forward to when that happens. But in P1, I think it's going to be Pedro Acosta. I mean, it doesn't really need explaining. The boy's quick. On to MotoGP. We'll start with the sprint race. I think in P3, we're going to have Alex Marquez. He performed quite well last year here on the Honda. Now he's on that Ducati. Now he's starting to build that confidence up in the second half of the year. I think he's going to get a strong P3. I think he's going to be quite comfortable. But last time I said that, I think he vomited in his helmet, so, my predictions could be more of a curse. I don't know this. If you don't want to be cursed by Under the Checkered Flag podcast, you're welcome to sponsor us. I'm kidding. But I don't think anything about it's cursed, mainly because I don't believe in curses. But either way, I think Alex is going to get P3. In P2, I think Marco Bezzecchi. Last year, he did have the accident, which hampered any chance of me trying to remember how strong he is at this track. But I think he's going to pick up some championship points against Pecco Bagnaia here. I'm hoping so, because I'd love for the championship to come down to Valencia. Which also is why I put in P1 Jorge Martin. I think it's a sprint race. I'm still thinking he's going to perform well. He hasn't qualified very well the last couple of races, so provided he sorts that out, I think we're going to be seeing him in P1 in the sprint. In the main race. Now, in my brain, I put Marco Bezzecchi in P4. I've done this because I put Pecco Bagnaia in P3, and I still do want that championship spice. I really want some dramatic rivalry between any of the VR46 boys, just because it'd be so entertaining. I don't want them to not be friends or have a big falling out or anything, but I want to see some on-track rivalry, some on-track frustrations, some hand gestures, some, angry things that they then laugh off, because that seems to be the kind of friendship that the VR46 boys have. So P3, Pecco Bagnaia. P2, I'm counting on that rain. I've got Miguel Oliveira there. I'll be like Razlan, I'll be doing my rain dance so we can get this guy out of his incredibly horrific bad luck. Because, my goodness, he needs it. Please, it would be absolutely wonderful for him to get a podium. It would sort of soften the blow of what has been a horrific season for the poor guy. And then in P1, I've got Alicia Spargaro. We all want to see it, I think. A little bit of redemption, maybe. But having two Aprilias on the podium, one of them factory, one of them satellite, would be absolutely incredible. It'd give us some great vibes. I'm all here for it. We know I love Aprilia. So fingers crossed that those predictions come true. So there's only one way to find out, like I said earlier. I'll be watching this weekend. I'm sure if you're listening to this, you'll be watching this weekend, because I doubt anyone is listening to this purely to listen to my voice. You're all here because you actually enjoy motorcycle racing. Anyway, thank you so much for listening. Like and subscribe if you feel like it, and I will be back next week with a rundown of the Circuit of Barcelona.